Well, we're beginning a new week. We're obviously in the second week of Lent. This means at the end of this week, we will be 1/3 of the way through Lent. It's only 6 weeks. You realize that's the same amount of time from Groundhog Day to the spring equinox. So it's an interesting time, and it's a time for us to relook at different things we do. Now, one of the things I had said is I was going to spend more time reading, and I mentioned this on Friday. I've been reading Richard Wolff's book on capitalism, which I found really interesting. Now give me a chance to look at some other books that I've wanted to read for a while. I haven't tried it yet for this year. I have a hard time getting into what's that? The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway, but I've tried. But anyway, I do like to read more books, and I want to get more writing done if I can. My whole schedule is off because I've taken the new position. So that's one of the things that's going on. But on another thing, I wanted to say that this coming Thursday, there'll be a wake service for a priest who is a pioneer in Boston radio, a pioneer in Boston Catholic radio, I should say. His name is Father Tom DiLorenzo. He died last week. I think it was last Thursday. And his funeral will be Friday at St. John the Baptist Church in Quincy, Massachusetts. There'll be a wake service at the church, what we call He Will Lie in State. And so he will be at the church on Thursday night. I think it's from 3 to 7, so it's quite a long time at the church. So for those of you who are familiar with Boston Catholic radio, now I'm talking about the generic. I'm not talking about any agency, including one that I don't know if it still exists. It used to. Connected to the Archdiocese of Boston, called Boston Catholic Radio. But in any case, there is this feature, this famous person in Boston Catholic Radio, and he has always worked in evangelical circles, very strong in the charismatic renewal, especially at the beginning. Well, he was always strong in the charismatic renewal, but I say at the beginning. What I mean is the beginning of the charismatic renewal, and he was always bringing the charismatic movement into all that he did. Now, he did, he actually, let me explain this. It is well known that we are all called to teach Catholic teaching, and maybe our take on it, what's the right word? Maybe our position on it, that's not the word I'm looking for. Maybe our bent on it. I don't know. But you can probably get an idea of what I'm talking about. Slant. That was the word I was looking for. Slant. Maybe our slant on it may vary slightly or a little bit. So he was more rooted in the charismatic renewal, which I'm very familiar with. And his teaching came from that perspective. You're going to find my teaching comes from a different perspective, even though I'm very familiar with the charismatic renewal. But one of the things to keep in mind is he was a pioneer in Catholic radio that is not connected to any diocese. There is a good way to put it. Long before Mother Angelica, and quite a bit of time ago, back in the 70s, he started Catholic radio, doing a Catholic radio program. And he was an inspiration. Now, my history. I started in radio in college, and then I came out of the Navy, went back to radio. I worked in public radio for a while, and then, of course, went in the seminary. Big fan of public radio. I do disagree with the taking away the funding of public radio. Doesn't mean that public radio didn't need to change its slant and everything else, but I do disagree with that, because there were just some great things on public radio that are worth listening to, very much so. I remember when I was in the Navy and we came into San Francisco, and we went over to the Hyatt Regency, and just as I was walking in with my friends to the Hyatt Regency Hotel, which is, by the way, the hotel where they filmed High Anxiety, So it's the Hyatt Regency in downtown San Francisco in the Embarcadero, I think it is. And we came in and they were just finishing a public radio program, and I think it was a jazz show, because I didn't hear the show because we would just come in just as they were ending, and they said, "Good night, this program came to you from San Francisco." And as a radio guy, those words just went right through me. I was like, wonderful. I wish I heard the whole program. But radio has an interesting focus, and Father Tom DiLorenzo was a pioneer in that kind of radio that's not connected to an archdiocese per se, but its members are connected to an archdiocese, and one that has the sincere desire of teaching you the actual faith, which is what I do here. And that was, that's the radio he pioneered. So there is, well, first of all, I have to make this clear, and I want to make this clear in a good way. But there is very little emphasis in the archdiocese, just about any diocese, on radio. And in fact, I sent a letter to the current archbishop when he talked about he loves radio, but he'd like to stay, but he needs to stay with TV or comments like that. And I wrote to him, never got a word back. I suspect he never got the letter either. That's the way dioceses work. I'm just going to say that. But in any case, never got a response, because I was explaining to him that radio is a very powerful medium. And now that we have podcasting, you're able to listen to a radio program, even if it's on a podcast, anytime you want. And this is something that I mentioned to someone I know very well, who was one of the pioneers of the internet. And I said, one of the things you've done from the internet is you have changed the time when you can listen to a program from when you have to listen to it to you dictate when you can listen to it because of the way things are set up. And that's what podcasting did. And radio and podcasting go together extremely well. But in a sense, radio can be expensive, but it's a lot less expensive than TV. One of the lines I like to say is I love radio, and because I only weigh 150 pounds on radio, because you can do that on radio. You can do anything on radio. In an audio forum, we used to do these nightly radio. We did TV and we nightly radio things, when I was in the Navy. And one of the things I did this audio production that was comedy. This is back when I was writing comedy. Believe it or not, I used to write comedy. Never did it professionally because I never got an in. But yes, I used to write comedy. And one of the things I did was in the Army, they always tell you have to dig a hole. I wasn't in the Army, so I just take their word for it. You're always digging a hole. Well, in the Navy, you're always waxing the deck. That's what's going on. So every division is in charge of some deck on the ship, and you're always waxing the deck. That's what you got to do. And so washing and waxing, stripping, washing and waxing the deck is very important. So, and whenever they're doing this, which is every single day, it's very difficult to get from one side of the ship to the other, especially when you're out at sea. Because you're out at sea, you can't necessarily go up top side, and you need to get from one side to the other, but they're washing the deck and they're waxing, and it's a real pain in the neck. So I did a traffic helicopter through the ship is the way I did it. It's on audio, which you can do on audio as a piece of cake. We took the sound, the sound effects of the helicopter from our power supply for the sonar system, which is not a confidential piece of information, so I can tell you that. And we used that as the background, and I would say, wow, we're flying over the decks right now, and we're, the whole bit. Guys thought it was the funniest thing in the world, and they were like, how did you do that? I said, it's simple. You can do anything on radio. Because radio is a lot cheaper, but it's not necessarily cheap. It's a lot cheaper, and you can do a lot more with radio, but it's also more personal. TV isn't personal. You're talking to everyone out in TV land, whereas radio, one of the styles that you learn in radio, you're talking to the person who is listening. So, for example, when I'm talking right now, I'm talking to you. Yeah, but Father, there's a whole bunch of people listening. Yes, but I talk to everyone in my audience as if I'm talking to you, because that's what I'm doing. It's a more personal medium. It's one that has a more personal, and so it's very good when you do that. TV is not personal. It's more general. I mean, it's just, and I'm not criticizing. It's just the nature of the realities. It's like the old saying of comparing apples and oranges. Well, if I was going to compare to you a real fruit of an apple and describe an apple for you and then describe an orange, you can't really decide which one is better, but that's not the intent of my description. It's me explaining this is what an apple is, this is what an orange is, this is how they're similar, this is how they're different. But there's no criticism there because it's not possible. Well, same thing with radio and TV. Radio has a very personal level to it, and so you can talk personally, not so much by name, but you're talking to your audience. You're just speaking in a microphone. I'm not in front of a set. I don't have a camera in front of me. That's one of the things you notice. I do a video per video version, but that comes through on YouTube through Podbean, but there's no picture. So I'm not focused on anything as far as looking into the camera, keeping the lighting right and all that. Radio is just me sitting in front of a microphone. And that's what Father Tom DiLorenzo would do. And he'd do that talking to you and making those ways of talking. And he was very passionate of what he believed in. He was good at it. Even if you disagreed with him, there were certain things he said that I totally disagreed with. That's fine. But he still understood the medium, and he understood the way to work the medium is you talk to the people. So what I'm doing right now is I'm talking to you. I'm talking to the audience, but I'm talking to each individual member of the audience. That's how you do radio. And you can do that because it's just me sitting in front of a microphone, and he understood that. Now, I had been, he used to run a prayer group when he was at Sacred Heart in North Quincy, and I'd show up the prayer group quite a bit for a while. And one of the things he would do is sometimes he'd give a talk, and he'd just have his tape recorder and his microphone there, and that would be his program. It wouldn't be live. He would record it and then have someone produce it over at WEZE. And actually, it was it WEZE then? Yes. No, it was. It was. Now, I'm going to tell you why the confusion happened. Because WEZE are the call letters, and you can hear them on 9:50 a.m., rather on 5:90 a.m., but they used to be on 12:60 a.m., and I was trying to remember because they sold that frequency to Disney, and they caught a lot of hell for that because a lot of people don't like Disney. I have, Disney's a great American company. I may not agree with some of their products, but let's face it, Disney is a great American company. If you don't agree with their current products, that's fine, but they still have a whole history, and you have to keep that in mind. So that said, he understood. So I was working over at WEZE one night. I was producing my own show. I used to produce for WEZE on WEZE, the radio, the English program of Vatican Radio. That's what. So I was producing the latest version. I had a studio I used, but sometime I used another studio. So we were over at I was over at WEZE English program, and he happened to call up, and I was talking to him. I know him, so I was talking to him, and I says, Tom, you say that God called you to produce a radio show, to do a radio show and preach by radio every day. I told him, I do a show an hour a week, and that's a lot of work, which it was at the time. And I said, you're doing it every day. And I always think of this conversation, that's a heck of a lot of work, which I've learned it is. But he used to do that, and he would send these programs all over the country to different radio stations, and that because he believed in his mission. Now, this was not a money-making operation for him. Neither is it for me. This wasn't all about profit. It was about his mission and spreading his mission. And even if I disagreed with him from time to time, I understood he was on a mission. And so his wake will be Thursday night at St. John the Baptist Church in Quincy, Massachusetts. And so I'm sure there are many people that will be there. But just so you know, he was a great pioneer of Catholic radio. And he's will always be known for that. And he was very faithful to this right to the very end. So the wake will be on Thursday night, 3 to 7 at St. John the Baptist in Quincy, Massachusetts. And the funeral will be the following day. We'll be right back. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media podcast is available on various podcast platforms? You can find us, among others, on Podbean, which is our home platform. You can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. Just look for Catholic Audio Media, all one word. On some platforms, such as Spotify, look for Catholic Audio Media, 3 words, and subscribe and listen to the Catholic Audio Media podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer, previews of upcoming podcasts, previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com, your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and so we're looking at Daniel 9. Now, if you remember the book of Daniel, Daniel was actually not written during the Babylonian exile when it takes place. It was actually written after the exile. This is the post-exilic period, and maybe, if I'm not wrong, closer to the time of the Maccabees, but it's in the post-exilic period. And so therefore, we're looking at this story of Daniel, and here he is. We're looking at this Daniel who is praying to the Lord. Now, we're looking at chapter 9, yes, 4 to 10, and Daniel says. Again, we use the Dewey Rayams because we're not worried about copyright issues. I prayed to the Lord my God, and I made my confession and said, I beseech you, O Lord, great and terrible, who keeps the covenant and mercy to those that love you and keep your commandments. Okay. We have sinned. What does that mean? We didn't love you. We didn't keep your commandments. Keep that in mind. We have committed iniquity. We have done wickedly and have revolted, and we have gone aside from your commandments and your judgments. We have not hearkened to your servants, the prophets, that have spoken in your name to our kings, to our princes, to our fathers, to all the people of the land. We haven't listened to God. We haven't listened to you at all. We have gone off the rails, in a sense. This is obviously me speaking. There is no off the rails in the Dewey Rayams or any other Bible. What are these rails here? Because that's a train discussion which comes from the 19th century. So obviously in the time of Daniel, it would have been unknown. To you, O Lord, justice, but to us confusion of faith, as at this day to the men of Judah and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to all Israel, to those that are near and to those that are far off, in all the countries whither you have driven them for their iniquities by which they have sinned against you. Okay? O Lord, to us belong confusion of faith, to our princes, to our fathers that have sinned. So to all of us, we're off the rails here. We are completely off the rails. But to you, the Lord our God, mercy and forgiveness, for we have departed from you. We are looking for mercy and forgiveness. And why is he praying that? Because he expects it. Do you understand? If he didn't expect it, he wouldn't be wasting his time. But they understand that those who repent come to experience the mercy and love of God. This is important because there are hundreds of people, there are hundreds of scores of people There are many people out there who believe they have sinned and they are outside of the mercy and love of God. And many of them eventually just turn away from God altogether because they believe they are outside the mercy and love of God. But St. Paul says, not possible. Not possible, because God is love. There is nothing you can do that'll separate you from the love of God. Nothing. Can't be done. Sorry. Have yourself a good day. Do you understand? So this is an important distinction. And as we are in Lent, we have to understand that. There is nothing you can do that'll separate yourself from the love of God. Now, sometimes you have to just accept that and understand that. And remember that, because you can easily get lost in the, but what if. There is no what if. There is nothing you can do. And one of the things, and this is one of the reasons why confession is so important. Well, if that's true, Father, why do we have to go to confession? Confession, remember, man is not made for the Sabbath. The Sabbath is made for man. Man is not made for the sacraments. The sacraments are made for man. Why do we have to go to confession? To bring you to fully understand, and the church and everyone else, that you are forgiven and in good graces with God. That's why. Oh, yeah. Here's a good line. I had a situation where I have a cousin, one of my cousins. I have several gay cousins. So one of my cousins is gay, and he lives with somebody. It's a long story, obviously. And he told me that he still goes to church. When he goes to church and he goes to receive communion, the priest, not anymore, he's in another place now, but the priest will not say the body of Christ to him because he knows he's gay. Okay. Now, I said to him, you know what? Either it is the body of Christ or it isn't. And I said, I have no idea if you went to confession last night. I don't know. And by the way, and this is true, in the Archdiocese of Boston, it is forbidden to turn someone away from communion in the communion line. I suppose, the Cardinal O'Malley never discussed this with me in this line. But I suppose you could always, if you really have to, pull someone aside and said, please don't. I don't know. He never went that further. He just said to me, you do not deny anyone in line for communion coming up for communion. And I went, yes, Your Eminence. Now, why would I ask that question? It was during the 2004 presidential election. And John Kerry was going to different churches and receiving communion. He happened to be going to different churches because he's Catholic, go to church. And there were all these people in the opposite side that were trying to really attack him on this and stuff. And, I don't want to get into any of that. So I was at the Cathedral of the Holy Cross, so it was very possible for him to come to the cathedral and receive communion. And my problem, and I didn't even get to answer the full question. I asked the Cardinal, well, what about if John Kerry comes? And that's, you do not deny. Well, the issue was not whether or not I give him communion. It was just understanding that if I give him communion, I do it on the front page of every newspaper in the world. In the world. And I said, I don't want to be on the front page of every newspaper in the world. That was my thinking, but I never got that far because he just made it very clear. So do you understand, right? And that's the whole reality. That's what confession is all about. It is communicating to you and to the church that this, and by the way, to all spiritual forces. This is important, to all spiritual forces. This man has received my forgiveness. All hands are off. Okay, do you understand? That's what it's about. Now, some people who have, I don't get into exorcists, but the stories are out there. And people who have done prayers for exorcism and stuff will tell you that if you have an unconfessed mortal sin on you, that the Lord, that and so the Lord has not forgiven you, that it's been known that the devils will start reciting them, but cannot do it if the confession is, if you've confessed the mortal sin. So that's what that is. It's really about you going to confession, God communicating to you that you have been forgiven, and communicating to all the forces in and out of the church, in and out of the material world, this man has been forgiven for his, or this person, has been forgiven for his or her sins. All hands off. So it's an important distinction. That's why confession is so important. That's why I like to go to confession. I know it's communicating to the whole universe. All hands off. So do you understand that? It's a real powerful sacrament, but it's all rooted in exactly what we see here in Daniel. God's forgiveness is there because God's love is there. And as Brennan Manning used to teach, what more could Jesus do to prove his love for you? Right? And as I discussed, unfortunately, when someone has obsessive compulsive disorder, it's like that servo motor that keeps turning. But what if? One of the dead giveaway signs of obsessive compulsive disorder is what if. Oh, we used to talk about when my Tourette's was really bad. We used to talk about how difficult it is just, but what if? And that's since I had been in the Navy, and my Tourette's really manifested itself when I was in the Navy. It started manifesting itself when I was a teenager, which is normal. But it really manifested itself when I was in my early 20s. I mean, it was more noticeable then because then it became verbal. And with it was the obsessive compulsive disorder became more obvious, which was there when I was a teenager. I distinctly remember that. So it's that what if, like that moving servo motor. And you just have to accept that's the sign. Jesus has done everything to show you his love. He can't do anything more. It's impossible. We'll be right back right after this. Going back to receive your high school diploma can make a huge difference in your life. Not just for you, but for your loved ones and your community as well. Across the country, thousands of free adult education centers are ready to help with teachers who will guide you every step of the way. Find free and supportive adult education centers near you at finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council, and the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer, previews of upcoming podcasts, previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com, your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and we're going to continue talking about the different themes, as I just mentioned to you, here during the week. Tomorrow we're going to be in the book of Isaiah. And this is one of my favorite readings. I'm not going to tell you what it is right now, but it's one of my favorite readings because the reading begins with the Lord saying things that your only possible response to that has got to be, uh-oh. So we're going to talk about that, and it's also one of the hopeful ways. And you got to realize the themes here are always talking about what the Lord wants to do for the people he loves. And, yeah, but Father, well, there's that guy again. Yeah, but Father, what if some guy has committed a really bad sin? If God cannot love you because of a sin that you have committed, that means there's a limit to his love. And that is the exact opposite definition of God. Because as even St. Paul said, God is love. So keep that in mind. And we're going to talk more about that tomorrow when we have that famous line that begins the way it does and then ends with my saying, uh-oh. So we'll check that out. And anyway, we're going to see you tomorrow. Have yourself a blessed day. Remember to subscribe, like, spread the word, the whole bit. We'll be back tomorrow. The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.